Hi, my name's Donald McDonald, and I'm proud to be the next guest on a Yank on the Footy, all the way from the USA.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 89 of A Yank on the Footy. I'm Craig Wessels from Sandusky, Ohio, and I'm glad that you're listening. I have a great episode for you. You already heard the intro as to who my guest is. I think you're going to really enjoy this conversation. A lot of laughs, a lot of pragmatism, a lot of straightforward, here's how it's going to have to be in order for some success to take place. I think you're really going to like this. I recorded this episode right around the first or second of April. So it's been a couple of weeks that I've had this one in the tank, that I've been working on a few other things that I wanted to get this one out. I do want to take a moment here, starting out, and send along my best wishes to Luke McDonald, and hope he has a speedy recovery. It was kind of an awkward situation he found himself in, and it's really too bad that he's going to be out for several weeks, and hope he gets back as soon as he possibly can. But ladies and gentlemen, I wanted to let you know, as before we dive in here, and just to remind you again that you can find everything related to the podcast over on the new podcast website at yankonthefooty.com. If you go there, if you bookmark that, all the episodes will be there. Sure, I'll be posting them out on my social media when they come out, but about 10 minutes after they go out live there, they will show up on the website as well. And that's a great clearinghouse. It's where you have an opportunity to share your feelings there. If you want to leave a voicemail, put a review for the podcast there if you'd like to do that. If you want to help out the podcast through the Buy Me a Coffee page, or maybe you're looking for a t-shirt or a sticker for your computer or something of that nature, the storefront page is there as well. You can check that out, and anything that comes in from those types of things goes right back into the podcast to upgrade software, hardware, that type of thing. So that's not anything that's going to be going into my retirement fund or anything of that nature. So I appreciate all of those of you who have helped out, and if you're listening and you want to help out, that'd be fantastic. I'd truly appreciate it. I would encourage you to sign up for the email list if you would not mind doing so. You can do that right on the website at yankonthefooty.com, and I have an email list that I had started on a Google form, which will be showing up in the show notes. But the ones that sign up on the website, I will be transferring those over to the larger list that I have, that I go ahead and use for when I send out my new episodes when they get distributed. And I send those out that's the first place that I send them, is to the people who are signed up on the mailing list. So if you want to get on that mailing list, that would be fantastic. Okay. One of the other great things about the new website is the fact that I'm able to put blog posts on there, which is really neat. It's also an opportunity for you to review the podcast there if you want to. All the episodes are there, going back to December of 2019. So hopefully you'll check it out. Like I said, it's a one-stop shop for the podcast in terms of finding all the information, the blog posts, the email, the message board, and the voicemail if you want to do that sort of thing. So hopefully you'll consider signing up for the podcast email list. Hopefully you'll consider sharing the podcast with your friends and family out on your social media. That's really going to help the podcast grow. I had a terrific month in terms of listenership in March. It was my biggest month of people tuning into the podcast since I began it 16 months ago. This month is going along like gangbusters as well, and I'm having a blast. I mean, I've had an opportunity to talk to some great people. I've lined up a couple additional wonderful interviews that I'm looking forward to sharing with you soon. I have one more that's recorded that I'll be editing in the coming days and getting that out next week as well. That's an interview that I did with Narrowly Meadows, who as I told her during our discussion, she helped me learn about the game of footy when she was still with Fox Footy and doing AFL Tonight and that type of thing. So she was a huge help for me learning the game. And she's in India right now working on the India Premier League cricket, and looks like she's having a fantastic time doing that. So again, share the podcast with your friends and family. That would be fantastic. Okay. So sit back and relax and enjoy this discussion that I had with Donald McDonald, and get well, Luke. At the end, we did have a little trivia section of about a half dozen questions, and he did pretty darn well with those. So hopefully you'll enjoy this. So sit back and let's have some fun with this, ladies and gents. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to A Yank on the Footy. I'm Craig Wessels from Sandusky, Ohio, and I'm absolutely thrilled to welcome my guest to the podcast. He played in the VFL and AFL from 1982 to 1992, was a key forward and a ruck with his club, playing his entire career with the same club. He played 155 games for the North Melbourne Kangaroos, kicking 165 goals during his career. When he was finished playing with the Roos, he began coaching in the VFL, first with Werribee from 1993 to 99, and then with the Box Hill Hawks from 2000 to 2002. He was an assistant coach at Hawthorn from 2003 to 2004 and spent 5 games as the caretaker coach. In 2005, he returned to North Melbourne as an assistant coach and then became the football manager. At the end of 2012, he did what I think might be one of the proudest things he's ever done in his life, and that was step aside as the football manager once his son Luke committed to the club under the father-son rule. He's been involved with North Melbourne's coterie groups since, and being a key liaison with the group. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm thrilled to welcome Donald McDonald to the podcast. Sir, thanks so very much for taking time out of your morning. Appreciate you coming on.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. It's an absolute pleasure on my part here. We've been working on going through the clubs. I think I've got 15, I think, of the clubs where we've done introductions and overviews on how the season's going to go. But figured we would go ahead and dive right in and talk about the current club, and then maybe circle back to a little bit of what you did with your career and just how it feels to be a parent that's watching their son go out and play this game at the highest level. Because, lots of parents, watch their kids out playing Auskick and that sort of thing. And you're getting the opportunity to watch, your son play in front of 50, 60, 80,000 people. And it's just got to be an absolute rush.
No, it's a big thrill, So, I've been very fortunate to have a really good, long involvement in the game. And, I've loved every minute of it.
Fantastic. Now I think that it's safe to say that the Roos might be in what could be called a bit of a rebuild. Is that a fair statement, do you think? It's a
fair statement, Craig.
Okay.
I think that, I think the club made a decision, midway last year that they really had to, if they're thinking about winning an AFL premiership, or at least to try and, it's a huge achievement these days to even play finals. I know you've been very being a Geelong supporter, but, you'll find that a lot of clubs now have just been trapped in this scenario where they've just found it near on impossible to even break into the 8. If you look at sides like Carlton and Essendon and Fremantle, look what St Kilda did to try and get themselves back into the frame again. It's a Gold Coast, it's an unbelievably competitive space. And the big clubs seem to have a capacity to always contend, where the smaller clubs, just seem to be sometimes struggling to compete at the very top level on a consistent basis. So North Melbourne probably looked at it and they thought, all right, they put their toe in the water in terms of free agency and bringing players in over the last few years to maybe see if they're an outside chance to contend, but hasn't worked. So I think they've made a conscious decision to go, rightio, we're going to have to go back to go forward. And, and history says at times there are clubs that have been able to do this successfully. I think one club in particular was the club that I originally came from, Hawthorn, they did a similar thing when Alistair Clarkson came on board. I was at the club, we finished down near the bottom of the ladder. And, in those days, I was very, very fortunate with the priority picks. So, instead of getting one crack at the top 3 or 4 players, they got 2. And they did that 2 years in a row in 04 and 05. And, were able to get a nucleus of players which propelled them to an unbelievably successful decade, if you like. So for North, I think our philosophy's been around, all right, we understand we're going to have to do this. And I think you can see the early indications are that it's going to have a huge impact on our on-field results, and it's going to be a real test of our supporters' resilience to hang in there for the journey, because it's nothing worse than when you go to a game of football and even though you know that you're on a development curve, it's difficult still to watch the team lose.
No. I don't know if you follow the NFL at all, but I've been a Cleveland Browns fan for over half a century, so I know all about that. So we've been bad for quite some time and are finally turning the corner there. So, the wins may be hard to come by this year, but there are little instances of progress. And I talked to somebody from a Hawthorne podcast a while back, and they used a line that they were hoping to see what they called green shoots in terms of growth during the course of the year. I mean, is that going to be an indicator of a successful year for the club if you see progress? Because I was doing some math here. I believe there were 11 players that were delisted, plus a couple. Ben Brown was traded as well, which
and Sean Higgins.
Big
moves. Like Higo's been a multiple best and fairest winner. Brownie's, contended for the goal kicking award in the last 4 seasons, excluding last year. So it's a huge move by the club to try and get. I think the Brownie one was interesting because of the fact that they were pretty passionate about keeping Brownie earlier on and offered him a 3-year deal, but his manager wanted 4, and so that turned a bit sour. And I think Higo was looking to move on the previous year just to try and attain some success. However, the club were keen to keep him on board, and he was happy to do that. But then once it looked like that we're going to be in a development phase, he chose to go to Geelong. So, and then the club thought, I think we ended up getting 2nd-round draft picks for both players. But when you look at them, they were probably in our top 5 players. So we could only get a 2nd-round draft pick. But that's where the competition is at, So, it's each draft pick that you get, especially inside, 50, which is my philosophy, is gold. You get to choose, some of the you get to pick a player in the best 50 in Australia. I think it's an advantage, but your challenge is how are you going to actually fit those players in? Because traditionally it's about a 3-year journey for a player to get a body to be able to compete at AFL level over the course of the home and away season. So you need to be at your best come finals time if you want to win a premiership. So you look at, if you only look at the Geelong and Richmond sides last year, you count how many first-year players were in their team. I don't know if there would have been one. So look, it's going to be a real challenge for us, but I mean, they had to start somewhere, and this is where we're at.
Right, and they are definitely at a point where they've got. I don't want to say they hadn't necessarily have extremes here, but they've got only 15 players that have played more than 75 games, which to me seems like a pretty small number. But then there's 19 players on the list that have played under 20 games.
Yeah.
At the AFL level.
Well, it's an interesting one. You referenced my son earlier on, Luke, and he was made co-vice captain of the club this year. And unfortunately, right on the eve of the season, he strained his quad muscle, so he's out for a few weeks. And his phone, he was over here on Sunday night, and his phone was getting smashed with messages around, what are we going to do, blah, 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 blah. And so, and Luke goes, what do I say? I said, well, you can't be critical of your teammates' efforts. Everyone thinks, you get beaten aside, the players didn't try hard enough. Well, that's not true.
That's not true at all. You're right.
Never goes out on the ground in any competitive sport not to try. But what happens, your confidence gets impacted when an opposition side is better than you on the day. I mean, that's just how it is sometimes. You don't concede, but the harder you try, sometimes, the harder it is to go well. So I just did a little exercise where I went back to 2015, and in that year we finished. We made a prelim final, but we only we were a finalist. I think we finished 7th or 8th at the end of the home and away.
Mm-hmm.
And I did an exercise, and I went through the preliminary final team that we had. And Luke was a second-year player. I said, mate, you didn't even get into that team. So you only had one really second-year player in the team. You had club legends. There was probably 6 players that played over 200 games in the team. There was probably 18 or 19 of them that played 50 plus. I said, look at your team on the weekend. You had, I think there was something like, 8 players that played more than 50 games. I said, so that's where we're at. You know what I mean? But I don't think that's an excuse either. I think what you don't want to be looking about a 3 or 4 year vision. I am pretty bullish. I think that you can turn it around in 12 months. You get games into these kids this year, and if the club is smart, there are other avenues to get players in. Like you can use free agency. I wouldn't be in our situations. No, I know I'll be trading out our first 2 draft picks because I think they're like gold. I mean, it's the only time you can access elite talent.
Right.
However, you're going to look at the minor leagues. There's at state league level, there's a lot of players out there who could come in and play a particular role, so that, could be a back pocket player for you or a small crumbing forward. You've got to be really astute in that space. And before you know it, if you can get your injury management side of things right, you're off and running, so I'm pretty bullish. I think you can return to a finals contention quickly, and you need to get a couple of final series under your belt to contend for a grand final. So, yeah, I think we can turn it around very quickly.
Well, do you look at, and they kind of took it on the chin this past week, but do you look at the small evidence of success that Sydney and Adelaide have had this year as how to turn it around quickly? Because last year they were down. Adelaide was at the bottom of the of the list, but I watched them play probably 2/3 of their games, and as you were saying, they played hard every game out. They you had veterans who were playing hopefully to get another contract, and then you had young kids who were realizing, if I don't play well, I may not be here next year either. So I mean, they were a really tough team to beat last year, even though they didn't have the most talent. And Sydney basically did the same thing, and they were decimated with injuries last year. I don't think they had anybody over about 5'9" that was able to play, because they had so many people that were banged up last year.
But that's the thing. That's the thing, Craig. I think if you can't underestimate like having your better players on the park and then having your players fit. I think that's a huge thing. And even on the weekend, we had guys like, Robbie Tarrant, is our premier defender. Ben Cunnington's our best midfielder, probably our best player. Trent Dumont is a really strong role player as a winger. Luke, who, one of our best and fairest and adds enormous composure to our defence. So you put those 4 players in, and all of a sudden, it just alleviates the pressure. It's a ripple effect, so and the younger players then only have to do their little bit. And when I looked at us against Port Adelaide in round 1, look, we dominated first quarter against Port Adelaide. So it's just the capacity to sustain it. That's your challenge when you've got a young side. So like you said with Sydney and Adelaide, that just reinforces my belief that the competition is unbelievably close. And one thing that you can't underestimate is not losing your self-belief and for the coach to have an ability to motivate his players, because if you can motivate your players, sometimes you can pinch games on the back of passion and effort. So anyway, that's I think there's a lot to be positive about.
So are you excited about the fact that they brought in somebody? I get, maybe this isn't the right way to describe it, but kind of like a Chris Fagan disciple as the new senior coach, and David Noble?
Yeah, I think it's a bold move. Just because it worked in Brisbane doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work with us, right? But I think that um, I think we need a steadying influence, and I like the fact that they've also brought in Paul Roos. I don't think they could have brought in David Noble without Paul Roos, and
Okay.
I like the fact that they've also brought in John Blakey. I think a lot of because I think I like the fact they brought in David Noble from the fact that he's been a football manager. And, we're talking off there before about the importance of the role of the football manager to set the actual football department up, to provide the resources for the coach to do what he has to do, and that's coach and educate the playing group. So, Brady Rawlings, who's our football manager, is a very young, inexperienced football manager. He's only had 1 year in the chair. And I think David will provide him enormous support and guidance. And I think that Paul Roos will provide David Noble in, a really good support in the role as a senior coach. So I like our setup. And we're also very fortunate to have two extremely experienced assistant coaches and fathers of players in that play in the AFL, and Gavin Brown and John Blakey. I think that's very, very unique. So the whole package looks good to me at the minute on paper, and I think we've still got I still think we've got some work to do in some other areas of our footy club, but that'll evolve. And I also like the fact that our list management team's headed up by Scotty Clayton, who's an unbelievably experienced person in player recruitment, and he's got unbelievable relationships throughout the industry. So that team that they've got at the moment, I think, is as good as you can get.
Okay, I mean that's a great list of names. I don't know why I know this, but I think it's probably when I started watching footy years ago and was reading up on people, and I Googled Paul Roos, and I found out he and I were both born on the same day. We share the same we not the same birthday or date, but the same day in 1963. He and I were born on the same day, so he's in a little better shape than I am. But he was great to learn from, watching him on the couch for several years. I mean, that was one of the things that was great learning this game. But yeah, I think, as you were saying, they've put together a great group of people to help lead this club. And I think that I think they brought in a group that's realizing they're going to have some patience, because there's going to be some lumps that they take this year.
No doubt. Yeah. No doubt.
But again, what does this, at the end of the year, we finished up the 22 rounds, the 22 games, 23 rounds. What does a successful year for the club look like to you?
Look, I don't think you could ever say you've had a successful year until you at least play finals. So I think they're going to have to rephrase the word success. I think everyone's going to have to accept that this is the first step of a journey. And I think we're going to look at each of the 22 games that we play in as an unbelievable opportunity to get games of experience, not even into our playing group, but even into our coaching group.
Mm-hmm.
Don't forget, we've had 3 senior coaches in the last 18 months. And David Noble, we played Hawthorn in the pre-season, and you could see straight away, Alistair Clarkson, his players had a stamp about him, because Clarko's been at that football club for 15, 16 years.
Right.
Dave Noble's been at our footy club for 4 months. So
15, 16 weeks.
Yeah, that's the thing. So that was his second game against an opposition. So he's going to learn an enormous amount about our group. And I think this is what this year is about. It's about opportunity to learn and use every game that we play in as an unbelievable opportunity to gain some valuable experience for everyone within our football department. And I think one thing we need is stability. We've had, I think stability is such an underrated thing that a business or a footy club or any organisation needs. So if you've got good people, we'll support them and get around them. So I think success will be in a funny sort of a way, just an ability to complete the season. I think that's going to be something for me that is going to be super valuable. And I think you've got to have a capacity to spread that message to your fans, because we need our supporters to come to our games and watch and support our players and our club, because there's nothing worth, even administrative staff, that if the supporters aren't turning up, it's just demoralising, and we've got to we've all got to knuckle down and support each other and support our players, so success, I think success will be judged maybe over a 2-year period, not so much this year.
Now, we didn't talk about this off air, but there's all kinds of rumbling about the location where the club plays a few games each year.
Yeah,
and is that's
part of life being a North Melbourne person, mate.
Okay, I mean, is that something that some people look at as this is probably going to inevitably happen, where the club's going to end up there, or is the club going to do its level best to stay in Melbourne and hope that Tasmania brings in an expansion club? And if this is not a question you want to answer, we can certainly delete this from
No. I definitely want to answer it. I mean, I think that we're such an easy target, North Melbourne, because people, I mean, half by, put us as irrelevant. It's interesting. You need opportunities to be a big club. Like in the 90s, we played Friday night football. We would regularly get 60,000, 70,000 people come and watch us at the MCG. You see Vision of the 96 and 99 grand final, there's 100,000 people there, 60 to 70% of the crowd wearing North Melbourne colours, so, we had the capacity to be a huge club. But unfortunately, with the way that the AFL has, does blockbuster games, like we just don't play in big time slots. We don't play big clubs. We've got this game against the Bulldogs this week in the Good Friday game. Like, that's our blockbuster game. And everyone's saying, if North Melbourne don't get a crowd, they should take it away from them. So I'm very bullish about us staying in Melbourne. I think we deserve the right. We've got a license like the other 17 clubs, and our destiny is in our own hands. And I think that the club's got to choose to say, we want to stay in Melbourne. And the Tasmanian people, have had opportunities over the last 2 to 3 years to really embrace this. And I think there's been a real campaign over in Tassie to try and influence their local people to not support North Melbourne. Because when we first went over there and started playing games, you would look at Blundstone Arena and it'd be a sea of blue and white. You go there the last couple of years and there's not many people there at all. And we've got 5,000 members over there. But I think that it's, there's been an undercurrent of support for people to kind of run us down. So, I think that we're a unique club. We live in North Melbourne. Like, our facilities are in North Melbourne. There's a train station being built across the road from North Melbourne, which is going to be the biggest train station in Victoria.
Good news.
Well, so there's also, we're in a unique situation of Docklands, where there's, a reasonably growing population is going to expand and start to grow around the North Melbourne, Kensington, Flemington region. So we're an unbelievable opportunity to become a great big club. And we've also got Marvel Stadium, which is our home ground, which is an unbelievable ground. And it's only 2 minutes down the road from Arden Street. So I think we've got to be super, super aggressive about staying at Arden Street, staying at Melbourne, and if the Tasmanian people don't want to embrace this, and if they want to have their own team, good luck, go your hardest. But for me, it's about, we've got to cultivate a group of people at North Melbourne and get them on board, get them to come and watch us play, and I've no doubt we can stay. I mean, we don't even have a debt, hardly have any debt anymore. I mean, some of the clubs have got $12 to $16 million debt. I think our debt's at about 400,000. So, you know what I mean? Like, we're going all right.
So you you have worked, and are you still in this position where you're kind of working as the liaison between the club and supporters, or is that a position that you've left?
No. So what happened because of COVID last year?
Oh,
My position was made redundant
okay.
because of the fact there was no games, and it was
Right, right.
we'd already had another staff member there, and so that staff member was doing other things as well. So they gave him the responsibilities of my role as well. And so what they did was they then approached me at the end of last year to see if I could stay on board in a liaison capacity, but more as a consultant. So I said, yeah, I mean, I have an unbelievable passion for the club, and I'll do whatever it takes. It's not so much a financial thing anymore. I mean, like I'm sure I'll get paid for what I do, but it's given me an opportunity to grow a little bit and look at other avenues of doing things. So, Luke and I started up McDonald Management. So there's a few things there we're doing. And I'm also a football manager at an amateur football club called Old Scots that play in the amateurs, is a very big club. So yeah, I've still got a really strong role at North Melbourne. And yeah, I'm very fortunate.
Okay. And that is something that is, I think, is to me is unique to footy, and it's one of the things that really drew me to it is the relationship between the club and their supporters. I mean, it seems to be so much more close than any sport we have here in the United States. I've argued that United States sports have, for all intents and purposes, they have priced the players out of the sphere that the fans are in, because you're not going to run into LeBron James at the grocery store picking up a gallon of milk. It's not going to happen. It's not, you're not going to, you're not going to run into one of the gentlemen I talked to from Port Adelaide said that every week when he would go to the coffee shop, he would run into the senior coach Ken. No, he'd run into Ken Hinckley. And in the week, if the club won that week, he bought Hinckley's coffee, but if the club lost, Hinckley bought his coffee. It had kind of become a tradition that they had done that. That sort of thing just doesn't happen here, and that is just it. It is just such a neat relationship that the supporters have with their clubs.
I think it's interesting. Port Adelaide they probably have the strongest relationship with their fans because of their location, and the old Port Adelaide that played in Sandford was the opposition hated them, and they've got a very strong bond. You only have to look at their home games, and the song they sing before the game. The crowd's very connected with their players. And I think in Australia we've got, like, in the States you probably only have one professional team per sport in that town.
Right. Yes.
Whereas here, like in Melbourne, we've got 9 and 1 down at Geelong. So yeah, it's a bit unique. So but we are fortunate. I mean, originally it was tribal. It was suburb versus suburb. That's how the VFL originally started. So but that's grown and changed now over the journey. So but yeah, it's a unique situation, and you have to play to it. I think a lot of clubs have grown away from that. I know it's been difficult for our supporters over the journey. We used to play at Arden Street, then we play at the MCG, now we play at Marvel. We also play at Bloodstone, and you also play in a state. So I think that's one of the things when you talk about what would success look like for North Melbourne at the end of this year. I think the big thing for me would be, how's the reconnection gone between our fans and our players?
Well, that's a great point.
For me. And I think that's something we really need to work on, because we are very fortunate, because it is a unique situation we've been in here in the AFL.
Yeah, and that's a great point. It is such a wonderful relationship, and do you think overall, since your playing days, because you played in the VFL before it transitioned over to the AFL, has the game overall, has it changed for the better since your playing days? Has the game improved?
Oh, it's definitely improved, and I think that we saw that last year. Like when the fact that so many people lost their jobs, right? The industry there was a bit of carnage, and it made us all reflect on, how fortunate we've been for the AFL to be a national competition with full-time players, full-time staff members at every club, and underpinned by the media, because the media rights are so big, because there's so many people around Australia that want to watch the sport. I'm even talking to you, and you're from the United States.
Yeah.
I mean, so, and people can access content on their mobile phones through the internet. So the game is enormous, and there's unbelievable opportunities for growth. And it's a completely different game to the one that I was involved in.
And and we're battling right here in the States at the moment that we've not resolved the agreement between the AFL and Fox Sports here in the United States to broadcast games. Now, there are a lot of us that have the international membership, so we get all the stuff, all the content that Fox Footy provides and all the games and that sort of thing. But there are a lot of casual supporters who are just learning the game and just falling in love with the game. And there's 300 plus million of us here, and they've not worked out an agreement yet. So I've been going on Twitter every day for the last several days and sending a note, to the AFL and to Fox Sports, asking when they're going to talk and that sort of thing. And just, I'm probably going to make them upset, and then they're going to blackball me and I'll never.
Keep it going, Craig, because it's, like the States, they're very, they're probably brothers to us, like in terms of the passion for sport.
Mm-hmm.
And, we need each other, and we need to, we're great consumers of American sport as well, with the NFL and the NBA in particular. And, I think we've got a great opportunity to really spread the word about the AFL over there.
Well, and I think, for people who are not baseball fans, which, I am one, but I'm very happy watching footy. This is a great kind of a game to dovetail between the end of the NFL season and the start of the NFL season, because, the NFL season begins early September, just as the AFL is winding down, and it's ending in February, just as it's starting up. So it's, if you're somebody who enjoys the contact and that sort of thing, and I'm not much of a soccer fan at all. I mean, that's just not I joke, and everybody I talk to, I always say, I think it's a communist sport because they don't let you use all of your body parts.
So, that's a good analogy, I think. And I think the good thing I like about soccer is the passion that it generates from its supporters, because that's what that, and I think that that's the thing that's a worldwide thing. And I suppose in a lot of sports, like Gaelic footy in Ireland, but I reckon in the States they do love the combative nature of the game.
Mm-hmm.
And because you love the combative nature of NFL. And I think there's an unbelievable opportunity for us to, really get ourselves exposed to that market. So, look, whatever you do over there, I'm sure the AFL at 100 mile an hour about trying to do something as well. So keep up the good work.
The thing that's been the biggest headache when Fox Sports here does carry the games is that when a game will get done, there's never any advertising about it at all. The game is on live at 2:30 in the morning or 4:15 or whatever, and a lot of people will DVR the games. But if the game ends early, there's no, you never see the team song, but they cut to like this 20-minute clip of video that they've been using for years of rugby from somewhere. I have no idea. They transitioned from footy to rugby. And I don't know if the people that are broadcasting, that are actually running the controls don't realize these aren't the same sports, and it's just this same highlight package with this really bad techno music in the background playing. And, I think that they would be well served if they would do like a weekly, like a 1 hour highlight show, during prime time, at like 8 o'clock in the evening here, saying, here's the stuff that happened in last week's games, if you didn't happen to catch them. And I think that would pay off tremendously for them. So
look, it's an interesting one. So hopefully that someone over there gets it right, because I do remember in the 70s we started to get a foothold in the States, but unfortunately it went by the wayside.
Yeah, I listened to, I can't think is Shannon. I can't think of his last name right now. He's doing a podcast about called The Greatest Game, about how they brought footy to the U.S. I can't think of his Shannon Gill.
Right. Okay.
Yes, is doing that podcast, and has interviewed people that were involved with it at ESPN and that sort of thing, talking about footy here in the States. In fact, I'm going to send you some links to a couple podcasts that you might enjoy. That one of them.
Once we can get back on track again and start traveling overseas,
Yeah.
I'd love to get over the States and bring Luke over there in their off season and maybe see if we can start spreading the word.
Well, it'd be great. Well, there's you've got 50 clubs in the USAFL here.
Yeah, I know. So there's definitely things we can do.
Yeah, and it's I think it's growing. There's a lot of passion. I've converted 3 people that I know of. One of them a Cat supporter, one an Essendon supporter, and one of them a North Melbourne supporter.
Well done. Well done.
So I don't know if he has an international membership yet, but I know on his page on Twitter, he does identify him as a Roos supporter. He identifies himself as such. So who do we've touched on an awful lot of things here, and I know you said you had an appointment today, and there were a couple of other little fun questions I wanted to ask you before we wrap up here, because I know you got something you got to take care of today. Who do you see playing finals this year? Who do you think is going to be in the top 4?
I think you can't go past Richmond, and I think they're morals. But I tell you what, she's pretty open. Aside from that, you only have to look at some of the results. Look at Geelong and Brisbane, and these sides at the start of the year, West Coast, that everyone thought would be absolute morals. But I think the standouts for me at the minute would be Richmond and definitely Port Adelaide. I think Port Adelaide are going to be a very difficult side to beat because of their depth. I think that then there's a clutch of sides like Western Bulldogs, Melbourne, St Kilda. I think they've all got legitimate claims. Look, Brisbane and Geelong will still have legitimate claims. I think Collingwood, I wouldn't discount them because of their experiences over the past few years.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there are a group of sides that are still in a development phase, like Gold Coast, North Melbourne, not the Western Bulldogs, Fremantle. I think that there's GWS, so it's a very interesting competition. And I normally, what you're really going to look out for is wait till you get to round 6, and you'll find that by the time you get to round 6, there's generally only 1 or 2 changes to the final 8 for the rest of the year. So history tells you that. So it's shaping up as a really good year.
I think it is. Yeah, I think it is. So let me ask you this for those of us that are in the States. Then I'm going to ask you this question because if anybody can answer this, you can. What is the shin boner spirit?
Yeah, the shin boner spirit is that, like, it's funny, like North Melbourne has always been like, we were late comers into the comp in 1925. The location of the club was like inner suburban, but it wasn't like, traditional inner suburban clubs like Richmond, Collingwood, Carlton, Fitzroy, South Melbourne. So North Melbourne, the location of North Melbourne, so you've got the ground, right? And on one half of the ground, you've got residential,
Mm-hmm.
but on the other half of the ground, you had these railway yards. There's a creek, and there was it was just industrial, like real industrial, So it was very working class, very working class. So it didn't have a great population base. So it was a unique sort of a club. So it never had an enormous amount of resources. So what happened is it was always a battle for the club to survive, but they always found people who were prepared to put the hard yards in and had a passion for the club to do the work to get them over the line. So it wasn't until the 70s that a group of guys led by Alan Aylett and Albert Mantella, who were past players of the club, who were residents of North Melbourne, decided enough's enough. We need to be successful. So, and I think those guys really changed the culture around, not just surviving, but thriving and have an innovative approach to being successful. And I think Shinbone Spirit is about never being beaten and never conceding, and taking pride in what our past has been, and really ensuring that whoever's there at the moment carries that baton and fights, like you said before about the Tasmanian scenario. We're always fighting. It's not a bad thing, you know what I mean? Because it keeps you on your toes. And I think that's
you have to not become complacent.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, Shinbone Spirit's like about, we're resilient, we're spirited, and we never give up. That's basically encapsulates it.
Okay. Well, I had a couple of questions here before we wrap up, and I put these together a couple of weeks ago here, and we'll see how you do on these. Okay, these are some trivia questions. Some of them are somewhat current, some of them are a little older. So we shall see here. Okay. And actually, looking at the questions I wrote here, I'm kind of regretting with one of them because there's going to be a little bit of redundancy here. Who has played the most games in the Royal Blue and White with 432 games?
Brent Harvey.
There you go. Now I'm going to ask you this question as a follow-up here, and we're going to get this out of the way. After Wayne Carey, who's kicked the most goals in North Melbourne history?
Oof, that's a very good one. Would it be John Longmire?
No, it would be Brent Harvey, because that was the redundant question.
Very good.
With 518 goals. We'll see how this one goes here. Who led the club in tackles last year? There were two players that tied with 75.
Jed Anderson would have been one.
Yes, he was.
Jai Simpkin, the other.
Trent Dumont.
There you go.
Trent Dumont.
Oh,
Yep. When did Mazda become the exclusive Roos supporter for their Guernseys?
Ooh, I reckon 99.
A little bit later than that. 2009.
2009.
I think they became their exclusive one. Yeah.
Exclusive. Yep. Yeah. Sorry, that would have
coached. No, that's okay. I'm sorry. Now this is one you
we celebrated their 21-year anniversary last year, I think.
You know, it's funny you mentioned, when you said that the club came into the competition late, and then you mentioned 1925. That just really dawned on me. That's 96 years ago. That's not late. That's not.
In comparison to the other clubs.
Yes. Okay. That's fair. Yeah. So what was the first year that the club went over 40,000 members?
Would have been 2019.
A few years earlier, 2014. 2014.
There you go.
Yep.
It must have been the addition of those Tassie members.
There you go. Yeah. Let's see here. Who kicked the most goals for North last year? And it was not Ben Brown. Of course, he was hurt most of the year last year.
No, it was Cam Zerha with 18.
There you go. You got the number correct as well. You got the number correct. Okay. How many grand finals has North played in?
It's a good question. We played in. I reckon we played in 9.
A dozen. 12. Yep, and you've won 4. Okay, now here's the last question, and I just added this one today. Who finished second on the club in goals kicked in 1984?
Second.
We know who finished first. That was you.
I know the winner was a superstar. Fair effort by the winner because he played 2/3 of the season in the back line.
Well, that's not bad enough. So you could have had 50 or 60 then.
Could have had 100. But But who finished second? Would it be Ross Glendenning?
Nope. Kim Hodgman.
Jim Hodgman.
With
yes.
28. And Ian Fairley
he won the best and fairest.
Yeah, Ian Fairley had 27. So
there you go.
both very close there. So, sir, I appreciate you taking time out of your morning and coming on and talking a little bit of footy about the Roos and, about the steps that are going to be successful this year and the positive steps. I'm going to borrow the Hawthorne green shoots. Okay. And every time I see them post something online about how things have gone well for them, I always just put on their green shoots and nothing else. I just send that to them. But this was a lot of fun. I really appreciate it.
All right. Sign to me, Craig.
Ladies and gents, I want to thank Donald McDonald for taking time out of his morning to come on the podcast and talk about the Roos, a club that he absolutely loves with all his heart. I can tell that if since I don't release the video here, he does have his Roos shirt on with the Mazda logo on there as well as his cap. Now the room is not painted blue, however, so we're gonna,
no, it's not. It's not. I'm about to do that down the track.
There you go. So, sir, thanks so very much for coming on. I truly appreciate it. I hope you have a fantastic day.
Thanks, Craig, and keep up the good work.
Thank you very much. All right. That was absolutely fantastic, ladies and gentlemen. I want to thank again Donald McDonald for coming on to the podcast. Lots of fun, a great discussion, and just an absolutely wonderful gentleman. And it was my pleasure to talk with him and my pleasure to bring that to you. Folks, if you've got an idea for a show topic or a guest, and I'm finding guests in some unique places now. I have to be honest with you. I'm thrilled to be talking with people who are involved with the clubs, because to me that's kind of in a way it's kind of opening the door just a little bit to maybe allow me to maybe gain some access with some of the other clubs going forward. If I've had a positive situation or circumstance with the person that I've interviewed in this type of a setting that might lead to something else. So I'm pretty thrilled about the way this has turned out in the last few months with the people that I've been talking to, and I can't wait to see where this goes in the coming months. Okay, I'm hoping to be able to bring some great interviews with some other well-known people. Don't get me wrong. I love talking to people that are fans, that are supporters of their club. Trust me, that is what this was built upon, and that's not going to go away. In fact, I've set up an interview with somebody who is involved with running OSCEC programs in the state of Victoria, and I'm going to be sitting down for that interview this weekend. Really looking forward to that. Completely different from what some of the other interviews that I've done, but that's one that I'm really excited about doing there. So yeah, like I said, if you got an idea for a show topic or a guest, or you have a connection with somebody who you think would make a great guest on the show, shoot me a DM, or better yet, leave me a voicemail on the website, yankonthefooty.com, or leave me a message there. And I'll definitely get back in touch with you. Okay, you'll probably want to leave your email address in that message so I can ensure that I get back in touch with you. Remember, you can find all of the episodes for the podcast on the Podbean app, all of the other podcast hosting sites as well, Apple Podcasts, Google, that type of thing. But they'll all be on the yankonthefooty.com website as well. If you want to bookmark that and have that on your phone or on your laptop, that'd be absolutely fantastic. Now, my hope is that maybe you'll consider giving me a review. If you like the way the show's going, you like what I've been doing, the guests that I've been bringing to you, hopefully the joviality that's going on, because I like to laugh. Okay, I mean, there are some serious conversations that we're having, but I trust me, I love to laugh. So that's the fact that I have so many people that are coming on that are wanting to have a laugh as well. That's great. Okay. So if you would like to, give me a review on Apple Podcasts or up on my own website, that'd be fantastic. I can put that right up on the website as well for other people to see if and when they stumble across the website and they see, wow, some people like this show, so maybe I'll check it out. Also, again, if you are so inclined and you want to help out the podcast at the Buy Me a Coffee page or at the storefront page, which is up at the top toolbar on the website, that'd be fantastic. I'd greatly appreciate it. Again, you don't have to, but Sure would love if you'd help out the show. That'd be terrific. Don't forget, you can reach me at yankonthefooty@gmail.com, as well as on Twitter at yank_on, and on Facebook and Instagram at @yankonthefooty. Again, you can find the podcast on YouTube as well. Just search out my name, Craig Wessels. Now, I have to admit, I have been a little neglectful in the last month or so as far as getting episodes up onto YouTube. I have about 10 or 12 episodes that need to be uploaded there. They are going to get there. They're just not there yet. So I've got some work to do on that. I've fallen behind on that. Been busy with some other things. Of course, I had the accident with my new car where somebody hit it a couple of weeks ago, or actually a week and a half ago, out in front of my house after I had had it for 4 days and had driven it for 33 miles. Yeehaw. So, again, if you're on the mailing list, folks, I will put out on social media usually a few hours ahead of time that there's going to be a live episode, and I'm trying to do those on Tuesday nights here in the United States, which is Wednesday afternoon. I think it's either 10 o'clock or noon. Actually, I think it's 10 o'clock in the morning in Melbourne. Now, I know that's not a great time for a lot of people because you're at work, but 10 o'clock in the evening for me on a school night is maybe just a little bit late for me. Now, once school is out in June, that will probably work a little bit better to where I can maybe host a meeting, a live episode in the evening, or possibly even early morning, so it could be evening for those of you in Australia. Okay. Now, folks, I can't thank you enough for tuning in and listening. I really appreciate it. I love the feedback that I get from people. I'm glad that you're enjoying the podcast. I mean, this has become kind of a labor of love for me. I really am enjoying what I'm doing with it, and I'm having a lot of fun. One, for my own personal edification, learning new things about the game, but also bringing more of the game to you and bringing my thoughts on the game, bringing the viewpoints of other people who come on the show as well. I'm really loving the live episodes. To me, that's a lot of fun. It's a fly by the seat of your pants kind of thing, because you never know what's going to happen. You don't know who's going to come on. Maybe it's you yourself talking for 40 minutes, or you might go an hour and a half and have a couple people stop on for 10 or 15 minutes apiece. I'd love to get more people on there, and this is not to discount Harper or Tony or Chris, who've been on in the last couple of weeks at all, or Frode, and Frode's having a fantastic vacation. But I'd love for more of you to join me in the live episodes. I know a couple of you have stopped by and tuned in. The folks from Kick to Kick podcast stopped by for a little while yesterday and was listening in, and I truly appreciate that. I've learned a lot from those folks that are operating that podcast, and if you're not listening to them, you should be. If you love the game of footy and you're really into the history of the game, I know I need to listen to more episodes than I have. I'm still trying to learn the present of the game, but going back and maybe listening to the years where Geelong was involved in a grand final would maybe be a good thing for me to do. I think they're up into the 1950s by this point in time. Like last I heard was 1958. So they're progressing pretty well through the history of the game. So, ladies and gents, like I said, I want to thank you for listening. I hope you'll share the episode with your friends and family. Put it up on your social media. That would be absolutely fantastic. Share the link to the website with them. Tell them about it. If you think they're a footy fan and they'd love it, I'd love it if you'd share it with them. Again, thanks so very, very much. We absolutely love this game, folks. As always, may your dribble kick never hit the post. And until next week, I will catch you later. Before I wrap up this episode, I wanted to give a shout out to this episode's club, and that is the Bridport Gulls Football Club of Flinders Island, and they play in the Northern Tasmanian Football Association. A Yank on the Footy wants to send out best wishes and best of luck this year to the Bridport Gulls, and their season got underway a few days ago, and they won their opening game this year against Evandale by a score of 11-9-75 to 3-10-28. Great start to the season, and I hope you have a fantastic year. Thanks for following me on Instagram. This has been episode number 89 of A Yank on the Footy. Don't forget that you can reach me at yank_on or at yankonthefooty@gmail.com. You can find everything about the podcast at yankonthefooty.com. I thank you for listening. I ask that you consider sharing the podcast with your friends and family. And until next time, ladies and gentlemen, goodbye. Stay safe.